Hello, gamers, and welcome back. It's episode 9 of Deadlock and Load. My name is Cryptic here with Banana Slam Jam. What's up, Brian? Hope you had a great trip, man.
Yeah, dude, Italy was nice. Was a little bit of escape from the Dutch rain and cold was much needed. Apparently, I
Yeah.
came back with a cold. For the listeners, apologize if I'm a bit nasally, but I'm okay. Don't worry, I'm not gonna die. But it was a great trip. First time to Italy. We went to a small little island. Just walked around. It's the island of Catania. If anybody watching has ever been there, just ate food and sipped some limoncello spritz and all that. So it was a nice trip. Happy to take. It's weird because I'm from Arizona. You live in Arizona now. In the winter, that was the time you were happy to be where you were,
Yeah,
and then the
dude.
summer is when you vacation. But here, it feels like a lot of people do the opposite. So, what were you up to over Thanksgiving weekend? How did that go?
It was a good time. Yeah, my girlfriend and I did like a massive Thanksgiving dinner actually with her family, and we had like over 20 people or something. It was
Wow,
ridiculous
that's hectic.
at her brother's house. But dude, we had like the best food I've ever had in Thanksgiving. It
Nice.
like legitimately could be like the best Thanksgiving I've ever had, but it's hard to say. Um, yeah, it's a combination of like two very different cultures. Uh, and so we have Korean and Bosnian food there. So we have a ton of Korean food and a ton of Bosnian food, and then we have like the staple of like turkey and mashed potatoes, but like that's like the the like last thing you want to get on the table, which is great. So it's yeah, it was a good time. It was a lot of fun. Cool meeting all these people I haven't met before, but
That
delicious food.
that's my explanation of what American food is, by the way. It's just a combination of like four different cultures into one meal, I guess. Like even if the dishes
Yeah.
weren't necessarily mixed, whenever I think of American food, I think of like Americanized Korean food, Americanized Mexican food, stuff like that. So that's my definition of largely, there's stuff like soul food and barbecue and stuff that's strictly American for the most
Yeah.
part, but
Sure.
that's mostly like that's the American experience, having four different countries worth of food at Thanksgiving. That's pretty funny. No, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, and speaking of, I was gonna try to transition that somehow, but we got a new background for the people that are watching the video on YouTube. It was custom made by people working with us on YouTube. So shout out to them.
It
Pretty
looks so
impressive
good.
artwork, and our faces. I feel like we're blocking like
The
art.
good stuff.
Yeah, so we'll make sure you guys get a view of that. I don't have it ready this
We'll see it in the
time.
intro.
Yeah.
They'll see it in
Oh,
the
okay. They'll
intro
see it in the intro.
before we.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not my job, so I'm here to talk and maybe give a intelligent thought every now and then. But yeah, no, it's pretty sick. Shout out, in the age of AI where people just make a bunch of stuff like that, I respect the grind, the personal artwork
Yeah.
there. So
All hand drawn. All hand
yes,
drawn.
pretty
It's
exciting.
beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I feel like it just shows. I don't know. It's like a nice little take on the game. It's like, yeah, obviously it's Deadlock in terms of it looks like the map, and it's kind of, but it's its own version of it. I feel like, and
Yeah.
for if they keep changing the map the way they're doing, like the park aspect of the map and the Halloween aspect of,
Dude, that I can't wait till we talk about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
if they keep doing that, then I feel like this is going to be a real retro image at some point because I feel like they're going to
Yeah.
change all these buildings. So, yeah,
Yeah.
shout out to that.
One thing we can transition from, because it was the holidays, the patch was actually delayed, right?
Yeah.
This is something that we haven't really seen, but it's a big holiday weekend in the States over here. So they pushed the patch back 1 day, not even like a full day. It was really like, half a day. But this new patch, I think was a lot smaller than I think a lot of people were expecting. I think me knowing that it was a big holiday weekend, a lot of people don't really work like several days around Thanksgiving. So we're looking at like maybe like 1 to 2 work days for most of the team that's probably working on Deadlock, as opposed to the 5, days during the week that they get to work on it. So definitely a smaller patch this time, but overall, I still think there's a lot of good changes, which seems to be the trend, what we've been seeing with the patch notes every week coming out from Valve, and this week was no exception.
I'm personally okay if most of the patches are about this size or even smaller as we move forward. I mean, obviously, over time, you're going to have to change the game less and less
Yeah.
drastically in order to get what you're going for because they'll ever so slowly creep towards the end goal of what they want this game to be. I thought we might get an instance of Valve time where they say like the patch is going to be delayed and then we see it like next Tuesday or something. That's what I thought. I guess I'm just too used to Dota and what they do with that. But
Just 2 months of
yeah,
delays.
so giving it like a 18-hour delay was a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah.
And it's understandable, obviously, like just because there are game dev overlords doesn't mean they don't have lives. But I guess for me, when I look at a patch like this, I don't necessarily consider it too small, just because I mentioned to you before we loaded into the show that there's some fundamental ideas to the game that they're changing. I mean, they've been doing that pretty much every patch, but I also think I've kind of wanted them to slow down a bit. I'll be honest. Like, yay, it's like exciting to read patch notes, but it's also like
It's a lot to digest.
it's like I read like 8 things from Hayes and I'll see that they changed something up. Like, wait, that was how that was anyways? Oh, I guess I should have read that 2 weeks ago. Like, that was one of the 9 changes to Hayes the previous week, or previous 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess I'll start off. I feel like I usually lean towards paying more attention now to the general changes, because the hero changes feel almost impossible to keep up with unless that's one of my mains.
Yep.
I like the fact that they removed, or they made it so it's diminishing stacking on ability range and duration. The reason I like this so much is because I feel like it's almost impossible to balance around stacking items like that, because we've had the big ball meta on 7.
Big
We
ball
have
meta.
like the permanent ball for Goo from Viscous, where he's like rolling with like Torment Pulse and being invulnerable. I feel like it's just not possible to balance having heroes that can just all in one stat like ability range, or all in one stat like ability duration. But then what I like the most about this, so first off, I think it makes build versatility. You have to be a bit more creative than just saying I'm going to get some fucking massive balls on 7. But it also, like, I saw some of their changes. Like, I think of Infernus as a hero that relied on uptime from fire, or why am I now Flame Dash. I'm like, why am I blanking on the name of it?
Not my main or anything. That's fine.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Flame Dash. Like, he relied on that uptime, so they like nerfed duration stacking, and then they made it so that he, specifically a hero that would be affected by that, gets charges on his Flame Dash once he maxes it out. So the idea that they added charges to heroes getting maxed spells, like they did it to Hayes the previous week, and then they did it to Lady Geist as well as Infernus. I feel like for the Infernus specifically, I really liked that it felt like it was in response to, like, okay, yeah, we're nerfing duration stacking and ability range stacking, but we'll help the heroes that would have done this otherwise. But then also, I like the idea that heroes are getting charges later anyways.
Yeah, I think something that we've talked a lot about, or just like is a very well-known concept in like Dota and other MOBAs, is things called side nerfs, which is essentially like a change in the game that indirectly will nerf a hero. And this is how they compensated it, right? Like they know they're like, all right, these are types of things that are going to massively affect certain heroes that do this type of playstyle, but there are other heroes that are too good because of it. So rather than trying to nerf like that specific hero, they're like, we want to nerf this concept, this general gameplay style, but we're going to compensate for that and kind of buff the hero that we think is going to get, unfortunately nerfed in the process, and we don't want to nerf that specific hero. So they tweak the times on them. And this is just stuff that we see a lot in different MOBA games. Like side nerfs to heroes happens from items, general changes, miss changes that you were talking about as well. So if you're wondering like, wow, this hero feels a lot worse, but they didn't really change anything in the game to this hero, like you look at your notes and you're like, there's like one change to Abrams. Why is this hero so good? Or why is this hero so bad now? It's like you have to look at the whole game as like the package of what changed that affects these heroes each patch. And yeah, I think the way you describe like the reason they buff Infernus here is the perfect example. He's like bottom 3 heroes in the game right now, which is really sad because he's my favorite and I just want to keep playing him. But boy, is it hard to win games on him. But this was their way of like, all right, we want to nerf this concept. It's too broken, and we're going to compensate Infernus by giving him slight number buffs in the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another example. Every time I talk about the patches, pretty much every episode, I feel like I just say, yep, clearly the game devs play the game. or at least
Yeah.
they're talking to people who play the game. This is stuff that I think is easy to oversee or to go as an oversight and just like ignore the one or two heroes that get absolutely boned by like general changes to the game. So overall, obviously they're fixing the or not fixing, but patching the game every 2 weeks, so they could fix it 2 weeks from now if they ever were to do that. But it's like there are people like you that have their mains, and if your main just becomes irrelevant for 2 weeks, it feels pretty bad. So I think in a time like this where we were talking about player retention, like 2 episodes, 3 episodes ago, that I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely
Something like that.
essential that they consider stuff like that, and I think it will be pivotal in whether or not they like keep people hooked to the game, but by the time that it's officially released.
Yeah. I think so far good stuff. For a little bit more info, we can dive onto the like some other stuff in the patch as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned the changes to Park Lane, which was the purple lane on the map, and boy, is it beautiful. This was something that we saw them start to make these types of changes with the Baroness Hotel earlier, and some modifications to kind of the theming around the hotel. And we're like, eventually, we could see them like having a theme for each lane, and we were kind of like joking like, oh, what are they going to do? But we're like, this is where they're going. Like they are updating the map visually as we go on, and I think so far like this first pass on this theme for purple is super cool. It just looks great. It's more immersive to play in. It's just better than the what we referred to as the brown and gray boxes everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's I get lost enough when I'm playing as is, and I said, we're getting like the Nightmare Before Christmas, all the different lands. That's what I'll always call it moving forward. I feel like that just for me is immediately what popped into my mind, and I guess like it's easier to get lost if the whole map is gray, but then if you pop out of a building and you're like, oh, I'm in purple lane because you see
All
that
the
you're
it's all the trees and
yeah, the
park
stuff
lanes
that's
and stuff.
unique to this lane. I feel like that actually does make a big difference quality of life wise. It removes that like second or two where you're kind of reorienting yourself when you walk
Hmm.
out of a building, which I think is like a difficult part of like combining a shooter with a MOBA. Is like
Absolutely.
having that map awareness and being fully yeah, just aware of where you actually are on the map. That's not a problem that I feel like most MOBAs have with having like the bird's eye view perspective. So yeah, I mean, I like that. I like that a lot. I feel like I already added the part about charges as a whole, but I thought what was interesting when I saw like these overall changes to the game was how many items they nerfed. They nerfed so many of the cheap
A
items in the
lot of the
game.
weapon items.
Yeah, all the weapon items that got nerfed, at least most of them were all like the 500 ones. They're all the laning stage items. So I guess I was gonna ask you, like, why do you think they did that? Is that just to prevent lane snowballing? Is that like what's is it meant to like kind of balance out the slot management aspect
I
of the
think that's
game?
what it is.
Okay,
I think that's what it is. I think right now, bullet damage in lane, like going wet, like your first items in lane are either extra regen because you're into like a double grenade lane that's just spam heavy and you
yeah,
can't
you
really
can't do
deal with
anything
it.
about it. Yeah,
Or you just go weapon damage and you shove the lane, because shoving the lane is actually advantageous in Deadlock. Whereas in other MOBAs, you want to freeze the lane and hold it. And there are scenarios you want to freeze lane in Deadlock. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm aware, so don't come at me. But I'm just saying, like generally, early in the game, when you are looking for your first item purchase, you want to shove the lane back, buy your items, get back in, pressure them, maybe get some denies, and keep doing this. And bullet damage or weapon damage was just the easiest way to do it unless you were a bomb or grenade hero, right? And then you get like Mystic Burst or something. And even then, you probably are still going like Hollow Point Ward because you are going to be at the HP advantage in your lane, and Hollow Point just gives you a ton of a ton of weapon damage to push the lane with. So it's just it was just really weird that like the 500 cost weapon damage items are just better at winning the lane in a lot of cases, and it feels kind of weird that that's the case. Like we didn't really see them change much at all about the 500 cost items to spirit, and I like that. Like extra spirit should be viable in lane, but most people just ignore it except for like very niche heroes, and they just go bullet. They just go their weapon damage instead.
yeah. I mean, if it's kind of like the one patch that even the bullet damage heroes were buying spirit items, and now if you're having everybody buy bullet damage items regardless of who they are, yeah. I mean, I guess Yeah, I noticed like particularly even in like the other categories, even if they weren't the 500 gold items, they were almost strictly nerfs. I feel
Yeah.
like unless they were items that got nerfed like 2 weeks ago significantly. Like I feel like toxic bullets needed some love.
Yeah, that item
Like
got devastated.
yeah,
I'm glad they buffed it.
I think if I saw like the last four patches, it was just nerf, 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 nerf. And anytime they change something like they did last time with healing meta or like the way healing and healing reduction interacted, I feel like you're always going to have uh, things to tweak back, basically. Okay,
Mhm.
like the overall healing was a bit, or heal reduction was too strong, so let's nerf it all. But looks like these two items now suck, so let's move them back. In this case, they gave a little bit more damage to decay and a little bit more damage to toxic bullets. So a lot of the changes here, not a lot, but I feel like at least 25 to 30% of them were almost like not reverts, but like partial compensations for what we saw 2 weeks ago. And I think that's something we'll probably see in most patches. I guess my favorite change of the patch, though, was the Urn. Flat movement speed of
Ooh, I
13.
was curious how you felt about this.
I
Yeah.
mean, I just think that it felt. I don't think having a mechanic like Urn in the game feels good to have. Like, okay, so I think of Dodo with Roshan. You have heroes that are meant to take Roshan because they do high single target damage. And I feel
Yeah.
like, you have mid boss in Deadlock, and that's fine. There's going to be heroes that are better at taking that than others. But I feel
Yep.
like being the designated Urn carrier based on the hero you picked having really high move speed or like an Ivy or something, that just feels. I don't know. I didn't like it. I actually like having quote unquote all heroes be created equal when it comes to this Urn objective. I feel like they. How many patches have we seen things specifically be nerfed on a hero just so they can't run the Urn really faster or something? Like it's
Yeah,
another
I
thing that's
mean,
like really hard to
yeah,
balance,
every time.
right? So how
Yeah.
about instead of worrying about balancing that, just say every hero in the game is equal in regards to the Urn. And then I also thought it would made it really hard for them to balance Urn as a whole. Like,
That was the other part. Yeah.
they've been tweaking so many mechanics about the Urn. And whenever you have a problem that's just too convoluted to fix, you have to make knowns. You have to make variables that were previously high variance affecting your equation. You just have to limit them sometimes. And like I mentioned, I don't think having move speed variance on heroes carrying Urn, like I can just be Haze with Smoke Bomb and run it 22 meters per second, 22 move speed. Like that's not fun, I guess, to balance the game around that. So yeah, I like that change a lot. I felt like that will actually show us in the future patches. It'll allow them to make Urn less of a problem in the game, because I feel like a lot of patches people are like Urn's broken, and then they fix it. Then two patches later, Urn's broken, and they're like, so yeah, I feel like this will make that happen much less often.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember how many times I've seen teams they get like a slight lead and they'll have like a Kelvin or something when Kelvin was like good and he just throws on the ice skates and runs the Urn at like 40 ms across the map, and you're just like, whoa, cool, like I'm glad we can deal with that in literally no possible way. He's running the same speed as our boosted zip line. Like very fun.
Yeah, but at the
It's
same time, you don't want to remove heroes being able to be fast.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
that's what I
Exactly.
meant by like it's the same idea as the ability duration and chart or range thing. It's like you don't want heroes to not be able to do this, but you don't want certain mechanics in the game making certain heroes broken for no reason. Like
Yeah.
that's what I don't like in the game when in any game when that happens. So I think they're doing a really good job of kind of trimming the fat when it comes to just kind of niche mechanics or various objectives that or like interactions that make a hero broken, and just saying, okay, let's just kind of like you don't want to make every hero homogenous, right? You don't want to do that, but they're not doing that. They're still keeping every hero having an identity. But I feel like when you have metas where like there was the meta that everyone built ability range, like that was just one patch, like the Big Ball 7, that was also like a Lady Geist patch too, like, and it's like, well, that's just not. Is it fun to have a meta be defined by one mechanic? Like, oh, it's the Urn meta. Oh, it's the ability range. Oh, it's the heal reduction heal patch. Like, I don't feel like that's generally good, like exciting meta for anybody
Yeah.
playing the game, basically.
Yeah, they're good. They're doing good job at just chipping away at those types of things and finding
Yeah,
ways to balance it. So that's
I
good.
like it. Yeah.
Um, we don't have too much more that we want to dive into on the patch. I do want to say that they did add Raven into Hero Labs, so he's got 3 spells currently. His fourth, his non-ultimate third spell is still not in the game yet, but definitely seems like an interesting hero, a very cool hero conceptually. Just he's like this undercover spy with an umbrella gun. I just love that cliche, right? I think that's super funny.
It was
Uh,
pretty funny. Yeah, I saw that.
like I think that is I'm a big fan of. His lore is interesting. If you guys haven't read his lore, definitely interesting
Is it
and
better
maybe
than
worth
Lashes
checking out.
or?
It's definitely not better than Lashes. Lashes still has the best, but his is an actual like lore that I would say is worth reading because there it kind of gives you a little bit more insight into the world that is Deadlock. Um, but his spells seem interesting. He has essentially like Stone Gaze from Medusa in Dota as his ultimate. It's very similar, but instead of turning you to stone, it curses you. So pretty cool ability, in my opinion. So this could be a massive fight disruptor. We see heroes like Medusa counter Enigma, and this could be like a definite like, all right, well they have a Dynamo, we have a Raven. I'm just gonna pop the ult and walk into the black hole type of thing. So there could be some cool plays when he eventually makes it to the game. But obviously, still Hero Labs hero has a lot to still be tweaked out, but I think thematically, that was the reason I want to talk about it. Very cool hero. Seems like they have more of an idea of what they want out of this guy as opposed to maybe some of the others.
Yeah, I like just, I mean, I talked about Viper being like a slide based hero. I feel like having a hero that's based on what direction you're facing is pretty interesting. Like, you mentioned his ult's kind of like Medusa Stone Gaze, but it's also, he just has a passive that lets him do more damage to you if you're facing away from him. So he's just a hero that introduces the idea of whatever direction you're facing actually matters. I don't think there's other heroes like this, like meaning off the top of my head, there's no other hero in the game that matters when you're looking at them or not, I think. So that for me is just nice. Like I think it's if the game had 200 heroes, this would be a bit confusing. But since they're
Yeah,
still building from the ground up with like 20-ish, 22 or something heroes, then adding a hero that cares about that I think is interesting to the game. And I also think it'll take some getting used to if he were to get released in the near future. But I do feel like his kit, like conceptually, is more well rounded than some of the other heroes in Hero Labs. Like having an ult
absolutely.
that's based on the direction you face, having a passive that's based on the direction you face. Yeah, I mean stuff like that. I think, yeah, just has a hero identity. So I like that.
Yeah, it makes sense for his theme of being this like spy as
Yeah,
well, right?
creeping up
Like
behind you.
it's
Yeah.
very cool. So I like it. I think that's a cool addition that they made. And then I guess there's not much else that we really have to talk about. One change I was kind of surprised about, I guess, was the change to Wraith's telekinesis. And I know you've played a decent amount of Wraith as well, but it no longer being a stun, essentially, it is a silence and disarm. They did buff her damage completely, like pretty much universally on the hero to compensate for this because, now that you can't hold people still, she isn't going to be able to like burst people as easily, but she just generally does more damage outside of her ult. I'm curious kind of how you think about this. I know a lot of Wraith mains were like rest in peace, but I feel like the hero still does a lot of damage and can still do quite a bit without her ult. So I don't know.
I feel like it's important not to get too attached to any hero's identity in this game because I feel like Wraith was always just the queen of pickoffs. Like she was just the
Yeah.
best solo kill hero in the entire game. And Wraith is my most played hero by a large margin. I feel like it's hard to like mourn a hero when I kind of like I feel like anyone who plays Clinks in Dota 2, because that hero's been fundamentally reworked like 6 times, I feel like you just have to
Yeah.
be prepared to be a Dota 2 Clinks player. You have to be prepared that your hero's identity will shift at least somewhat over time because the game is so early on that they're also, I think it's always important to consider the fun, quote unquote, of playing a hero versus the enjoyment of playing against it. Um,
Yeah.
and like kind of adding those two up as like, on the scale of whether or not you should keep it in the game. And so it is weird. It's definitely weird that they would remove basically what makes Wraith a pickoff hero. So now, like you said, she's much more just raw damage. I
It's
guess
not like
just
it can't be used for pickoff. It's just not as much of a guaranteed this
yeah,
hero
it's
is
it's
dead.
not
You
like
know?
the blip do like I mean you could also if you're silence and disarm you can use items. So
Yeah.
like it's no longer suddenly you have to react before she ults you. It's like you can warp stone away from this. You can unstoppable. You can, you know, uh, yeah. You just have options.
Metal
So
skin.
yeah, metal skin. So it's way easier to itemize against. I feel like overall when I just look at changes like this, it's kind of similar to Haze, like meaning like they've changed the way her ulti works in terms of like team fight, then solo pick off, then it was primarily bullet damage, then it made it spirit damage, and it's like that significantly changes the way a hero works when you do that kind of stuff. So even like making it so Yamato, like her ults no longer makes her unkillable. It's like I feel like that was a large part of that hero's identity when I started playing this game.
Yeah.
So I guess I trust that they kind of weighed the pros and cons of keeping Wraith's ult as like a hard lockdown stun, and they just thought like it's still useful, but let's try to give her something else to play around. Maybe just be predominantly damage as
Yeah.
opposed to solo kill potential. And so I'm trying my best. My expectations for a game like this is that it just doesn't like nothing is set in stone to be the way it's going to be, and you have to be pretty open to change. I think uh, if you're going to be playing a game and it's like alpha slash pre-release state.
Yeah, I agree. Um, we don't really have to go too much more into the patch. Those were just some of the main things that we wanted to kind of focus on, and we have a second topic that we kind of want to talk about today,
Yeah,
which is something that we see in pretty much every game of this genre, which is the idea of iconic heroes. And every game kind of has their own, right? There's definitely iconic heroes in Overwatch and League and Dota. And so it's the idea of like, all right, well, Deadlock, what is or who are the iconic heroes of Deadlock, you know?
yeah. I mean, so the first question I wanted to mention is like, if you were to ask people at home, if you were to, I feel like you might get a slightly different answer if you asked anybody this question, which is like, what generally would make a hero iconic? So I guess for me, I feel like iconic heroes either have super unique mechanics that make them fun, or they have like a well-rounded kit that kind of includes some of the fundamental aspects of the game. I think a perfect example for me is Juggernaut from Dota. He has magic immunity built into his kit. He has a farming tool. He has like a solo kill potential with his ult. He has sustain, and he has a crit, right? So it's like, I feel like that's four general mechanics that every hero can consider building to some extent with items. And I just feel like having a hero that's like a jack of all trades will naturally make them more likely to be iconic, but also when they're just straightforward, it's like I read this spell and that makes sense. What that
Yeah.
does, I feel like heroes, even like Viscus, for instance, it's difficult for them to be iconic because their abilities are so niche, and understanding how to min max it is so specialized. So I think there has to be a degree of jack of all trades simplicity to a hero in order to make them iconic. What do you think?
I agree. I think it either has to be such a unique design that alone can make it iconic, or like to where like difficulty or whatnot doesn't matter. Because when I think about someone like Invoker from Dota, I feel like Invoker is arguably one of the most iconic heroes
That's
or
true.
character designs of any video game of all time. Because it's such an incredibly well designed hero that even like it took League of Legends like 14 years to make their own version of it, and it's still not even like as good or unique, right? Like that's the difference, right? Like there's certain things that just make heroes so cool. Like we could talk about the different iconic heroes in Dota forever, but um I agree with what you're saying, and I think when it comes to Deadlock, There are a couple heroes that come to mind to me for sure in
Name one
terms of like,
first because we haven't talked about like we didn't coordinate this. So name your one first. Like out of all the ones you're thinking of, what's the number one?
I mean, you know who I'm gonna say.
I think I do, but
It's Infernus, I
okay,
think,
yeah.
actually. I legitimately think it's
Is
Infernus.
that the jack of all trades situation
I
or
think
fun?
I think he is a pretty much near jack of all trades. He can be built in a variety of ways where he can be bullet damage. He can be kind of like he can be like a bullet damage hyper carry for the late game. He can be like this spirit damage kind of like utility hero. He can be like this initiating tank. Like it depends on your play style for sure, but I think his design conceptually is very good. There's not like I look at his different mechanics and I don't see like things from this hero that are stolen like very obviously from like other types of designs. Like he does that's one of the reasons I picked him up in the first place. I was like the general design and the way the hero plays feels very cool.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree with that. I feel like he's also like he's pretty swag. I feel like
Yeah,
you
he's got
know
a lot swagger for sure.
for all the Dota players, I we're always gonna make these connections because we both played so much fucking Dota. I feel like he's kind of the Shadow Fiend of Deadlock. Like he's
Ooh,
like
kinda, huh?
he's like a mixture of different things: utility, team fights, mixed damage, and then he's also got swagger. You know, his walk, the way he runs and stuff. Like I think I would compare him to Shadow Fiend myself, but
Dude, that's such a good comparison. I never would have even thought about it, but that comparison's actually so spot on.
nice. Yeah, no, I didn't come into this with that, so that was just instinctually based on what you were saying you liked about the hero so much. I was like, yeah, that actually sounds a lot like Shadow Fiend because there's gonna be parallels between every game out there. Like you said, like League made their own Invoker. Like there's gonna be some degree or some version of this hero, at least you know some close version of it. Obviously, there's always gonna be a bit of. It's funny because I feel like he's the Batrider of Deadlock in the sense of what spells he has in Furnace,
Yeah.
but I feel like he builds slash plays more like a Shadow Fiend. I guess like I was going off Juggernaut because one thing I think about Jug specifically in Dota is that if he's good, you will see him in 98% of games. Like you will see this
Yeah,
hero
I know
every
where we're
single
going here.
game, right? So you know exactly where I'm going. I'm gonna go with the hero that has like at least a 90% pick rate every patch, and sometimes 100%, and that is Hayes. I feel like the thing about Hayes is that she's just super fundamental. I feel like the hero's kit is super self-explanatory. I could teach my grandmother how to push it, like the buttons. Maybe she'd be bad, but she would understand at least this hero shoots and throws a dagger. That's it. And at the end of the day, a game like Deadlock, the mechanics themselves, like just if every hero in this game had no spells, the game would still be kind of complicated. I feel like obviously boring at the end of the day, but it would still be complicated with how much you can do with movement and overall mechanics of lane and map
Just
awareness and
items.
farming and items. So having a hero that just kind of plays itself in a game like Deadlock, I think is why Hayes has such a high pick rate, but also just because I love damage, I love farming, and I love killing people. Like, who doesn't love that? So, those are just fun mechanics of MOBAs and shooters alike. And I think Hayes is, you know, we talked about Wraith being the iconic pickoff hero. I feel like Hayes is iconic for all of those things. So, yeah, I'll always go when I think like I actually did not come into this thinking a hero like Invoker being highly specialized, and like unique in that way where like a lot of people if they have a absolute favorite hero that would be it, right? So I
Yeah.
guess I didn't consider that archetype when I was thinking about iconic heroes. So my question would be, do you think there's a Deadlock equivalent of that, or what's your other one if you don't
I
think?
don't think yet. I
Okay,
think the closest to getting there is actually Yamato, believe it or
I
not,
could see
but
that.
I don't really think that we have like an Invoker-esque like type hero in terms of that type of appeal. I think that one of the next closest is gonna be either Lash or Mo. Like M and K and Lash, I feel like are gonna be like the other. Which one of these two, whenever they get like the full, like the models and everything are fully fleshed out and whatnot, I feel like these two heroes are just so beloved by the community. Mo is mostly beloved. Lash is definitely like this love slash hate thing, but that's what makes him so funny. Um, and like his bio and everything as well as background is just
So this is what I
it's
didn't
just
consider. Are you
perfect.
going like purely off of bio and looks of the character? Like I know all of the memes on Reddit about Mo and Krill and shit, but I feel like Mo and
No.
Krill has like one of the lowest pick rates.
He does. He does have one of the lowest pick rates, but it's like one of those things that like it's again, he has a very kind of odd play style
He
that
does.
is unique to this game almost. Like I don't I'm because there's a lot of like other like tanky initiators and stuff like that you can see in different games. Something about Mo and just the funny design of the hero and just how he plays is it feels unique to me. And I think that's maybe part of it. But yeah, when it comes to like right now, if someone was to say who I think is like the most recognizable, most iconic, I'd agree with you that it's Hayes. I would 100%. I feel like Infernus to me is probably the next, like number two, but there's definitely a debate over it.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? We could probably talk about any subject we talk about on this podcast for hours, but I guess my quick question, like to wrap up this little bonus section, is what would you say if you gave like two or three heroes that are the least iconic in Deadlock? Like they like you would be offended if people named them as their most iconic hero.
Great talent.
Grey Talon, that's a good one.
Number one is Great
We'll
Talent,
alternate. You
100%.
said Grey Talon.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of going through it for myself because I didn't think about this before. I would still say Viscous. I think any hero that's like super nuanced and complicated but not flashy will always be or never be iconic. So I'd go Viscous.
I'm stuck. There's like a tie in my eyes here, but I think I'm gonna lean Warden.
I was Iron Warden. That was
I think I
yeah.
think Warden is a very good hero, but he is a middle of the line. Like he is like a very much down the middle hero of he just does what he does really well. He's going to be in the meta pretty much always. They keep reworking some of the aspects of him, but again, not a super flashy hero. There was a moment where he was kind of flashy with the majestic leap, like massive change to the ult build, but that is one of the things that was massively nerfed this patch, the duration extending and range extending and stuff like that, right? So you can't do that type of build anymore. But yeah, I think Warden would be my next pick.
My other one would be Paradox. I feel like Paradox is like the Batrider of Dota because
Really?
I think that any hero that is significantly better in coordinated play will never
That's
be
true.
an iconic hero because you'll never see it nearly as highly picked in low MMRs or for newer players. And okay, when I started playing Dota, I was learning Tidehunter just by random. And Tidehunter is a garbage hero if you're not playing around your team. So I was playing him and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck this hero does. And I feel like if you're new-ish to the game and you're playing Paradox, you'll be like, what the how do I kill anybody? Like I like the
Yeah.
hero's broken, don't get me wrong, like
Yep.
conceptually, but it doesn't play itself at all. And I feel like unless you're party queuing and your teammates understand what you're offering to them, Paradox will like it's just a hero. I wholeheartedly believe that even though Invoker is super complicated, he's so flashy and stylish that everyone kind of knows what he
Loves
does.
playing him.
Like they love playing him and know that. But the other, like I've hardly played Invoker at all, and I know exactly what that hero does. And I still don't. I'm like, what does Paradox do? You know, it's like I'm like, oh yeah, that thing does silence me, or wait, maybe it doesn't, or like, it's like it's just one of those things. I feel like it's the hero that if you don't play it, you're just not interested in it. Like I don't know how to explain it. I just can't be motivated to like keep up with Paradox patch notes out of all the heroes. It's like I'm gonna keep up with Vindicta patch notes because she's fucking annoying, and it's like I don't want to get giving people 800 souls for free or whatever. But
Yeah.
when it comes to Paradox, it's like when I get owned by a really good Paradox player, I'm just like, you get this one, man. Like I'll see another one
Good
of you
job.
200 games from now. I'll see you later. But yeah,
Yep.
so that would be my last and all pick for least iconic heroes. At the end of the day, there's only 20 something, so it's not like we've named like a fifth of the hero pool. So there's gonna be people in the audience or listening to this that are offended, and I accept
My
your offense.
main. This
No,
is my hero. No, it's the thing is There's still a long way for this game to go. We're gonna get a lot more heroes. Like heroes gonna be reworked. We're gonna have new model passes. Like Abrams just got a new model update as well, which looks way better in my opinion. So that's also very cool to see. Yeah, I don't know. I think Deadlock in a good spot. I think it's going to be in a good spot. I'm excited that I think I can play Infernus again and not reliably lose every game. So we're gonna give that one
Nice.
a
That's a
good
win.
try this week. Yeah. Yeah. Any hero? Okay, before we get to our last segment, which is always the "What did I learn this week" segment, and then we'll wrap things up. Is there any hero that you're kind of you haven't really tried yet, but you still are like, this is someone I'm gonna give it a shot finally?
Just from these recent changes.
Just in general, like, because we've been playing the game for a bit now, right? And the game's been out for a while, and I feel like for a lot of people, they still haven't had a chance to get their hands and really dive deep into the whole hero list. Like people kind of keep themselves to like a handful at most, usually.
The hero I've always considered playing and I just never do is Kelvin. That's like always the hero I've considered playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Kelvin's just a cool hero. I know I was thinking of like some cold pun, but I guess like
Cool guy.
but he's also like somewhat intimidating. I don't know. He's like one of those heroes that yeah, he kind of plays himself, but then also he doesn't. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to potentially play him. I feel like it kind of consistently changes from patch to patch. For me, since so many patches are like since the patches so drastically changed the game, like even for me, like my second most played hero is Hayes. Wraith Hayes player here. Sorry guys. But it's like I read these patch notes and I'm like, wait, people can move during my dagger now? Like, what? So it's like one of those things where I feel like it's almost the way the patches are coming out, it feels as if I have to learn my heroes kind of again every time they come out. So I still get the sensation or like the dopamine hit of learning something without it being new. So
That's fair.
I
Okay,
think
I can
as
get that.
time goes on, when the game is slowly settling into place, I'm more likely to branch out. But
Okay.
as of now, unless you're playing like 15 games a day or something, I think it's very difficult to have the headspace to also learn new heroes.
Yeah. I can. Okay, that's fair. That's a really good point, actually.
Yeah, because like you said, I mean, even Wraith, like, I'm gonna feel like I don't even know what the hero does. Like,
Yeah.
I've been playing PoE this whole weekend, so haven't played any since they changed her ulti. But yeah, I mean, shout out to Path of Exile. I never played this first one, but the second one is quite dope. So
Should we transition to the what we learned this week
yeah,
then, and maybe talk about Path
absolutely.
of Exile?
Yeah, what did we learn this week as our final
Oh
segment? You
my
you can go
god.
first. You can go first. What did you learn this week?
Oh god, Path of Exile 2 is everything that I wanted Diablo 4 to be. So obviously this is a Deadlock podcast, but Brian and I, we do play a variety of games. Obviously, like we're Dota players. We grew up with that. Or not grew up, but like we've been playing Dota for a long time. We love Deadlock. That's why we started this podcast, because this game is incredibly fun and very unique. But when we're not doing stuff like that, I like to get my
We're
hands dirty
humans.
in ARPGs, and for me it was Diablo for a long time, and it just didn't really scratch the itch correctly in a way. Like it didn't feel difficult enough in a way, and it didn't feel like I don't know how to describe it. It like Path of Exile just feels like I have way more control over my game, and it feels like it's just slower paced and more difficult and more fun. And yeah, so for me, learning to play Path of Exile this weekend has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I guess if it hasn't been already clear by like the ninth episode of this podcast, I think our aim has been to talk about Deadlock as like the core centerpiece of this podcast, but also like it's a little bit about life and shit too. Like we don't just think about Deadlock 24/7. And I guess for me, I have always been traditionally, maybe not the last year or so, I've gotten better about it, but a workaholic. And something that for a while, for a really long time, I actually can't remember how long, since video games were my job, I had a hard time letting myself not stream and just play a game, binge the shit out of it. Like, it's been a long time since I've done that, and at least not felt guilty about it or thought like I should be being more productive. And this weekend, it just hit me on Friday that I was jealous watching other people play Path of Exile, and I'm like, why can't I just tune out of life and play some Path of Exile? And then it's like,
Yeah, dude.
but I can tune out of life and play Path of Exile. So I spent pretty much my entire Saturday playing Path of Exile, and so I guess just shout out to giving yourself some,
Grinding gear
yeah,
games.
just game binging and like kind of those are for me kind of zen games, like grinding gear games. Like you're just getting the dopamine hit of making progress, and it's as simple as that. So don't forget to give yourself some time to just do and not like that, but in video games
To enjoy your
specifically.
games and
Yes, to
have
enjoy your games. Yeah.
yeah. Doesn't always have to be about competition, there is a fun competitive side of Deadlock, but there is also times when you just want to queue up with your friends, have a good time, and
Kill some
there's
shit.
a little yeah, that's why we love gaming at the end of the day. That's the
Yep.
whole reason I stay in the scene. It's for that. So
Agreed.
but that'll do it. That's the end of episode 9 this week for Deadlock and Load. Just want to say thank you all so much for listening, for tuning in, whether it be, on Twitch or uh, YouTube or Spotify. It's on all three. So make sure everyone to check them out. You can look at previous episodes, but make sure to come back next week as we'll be back with episode number 10.
Double
A couple
digits.
days earlier, though. A couple days
Yep.
earlier.
Sounds good. I'll see you guys for next week. Thanks for listening. I hope you can all be staying well and unsick while I am making my amends, because this is the time of year where everyone does. So spend some time with your family. Love you guys. See you next time. See you later, Ricky. We're still not going to act like we're
Later.
friends. Bye.
That's fine.